Moreno ורבנו.
Hi, Amos, מה שלומך?
שלומי טוב.
That's good. That's good.
It's a new week and a new topic.
Yeah, it is a new topic. It's a very interesting topic because if you think of values, then we tend to think of values in terms of how people act, and we talk about arrogance and humility. You can talk about accountability. You can talk about the work ethic. Those are things that usually come up. We're not being ethical, not being moral, whatnot. But today we're going to talk about a very, very interesting value that I think is kind of underrated or goes under the radar.
Yeah.
People don't perceive as a value that determines decision making.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a good roll on from our last topic, which was humbleness and arrogance, and it works into that, but it's a bit different, and you'll find out if you listen the whole way through.
That's right. So you have to listen to the previous episodes to learn more about arrogance versus humility. And today we are going to talk about the wonderful, wonderful, and very captivating value of modesty.
Modesty, or tzniut in Hebrew.
Or tzniut in Hebrew. So first and foremost, like we do with all of our values, we have to define what the value is. And then hopefully today we'll get into some practical applications of actual businesses and even large corporations who've incorporated modesty into their company and how that's had an effect or possibly a culture change.
Well, today for us, not for our dear listeners. Will be next episode, possibly.
Well, whenever you listen to it, if you
that too.
You got to listen to next episode.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. All right, so let's define modesty. So Amos, since you are the sage between both of us, but you're the only one who's named after a prophet.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well,
so
in this room anyway.
That means I'm named after the temple.
Yeah.
And the temple is by definition not for profit.
That's also true.
So where's the source? Where's the source for tzniut in the Torah?
So we have a source from Micha, which is I can't read it quite from here.
Source of Micha, which is ve'atznei lechet im Elohecha.
Yeah, and it talks about modesty in all walks of your being.
Right. So I want to read the context of what Micha. Micha is one of the 12 prophets in the Treasar, and he in chapter 6, if you want to look it up, he talks about the different ways for Israel to get closer to God, to Hashem. And on one verse, in one verse, he talks about what God demands from you. The context of what he's talking about is the concept of sacrifices, and that we're not going to get into today's sacrifices, but what he's saying effectively is God doesn't want the thousands of animals you offer. Sacrifices are important for another reason, but it's not because God wants the animals. God wants you to change your behavior, and if sacrifices aren't a catalyst for changing your behavior, then the animals themselves are not the goal. But people lose sight of that. Many times throughout the temple, they think if I bring my animal, then it's okay. Just similarly, like if I pay a fine, then I can do the transgression again, right? I can violate the law again as long as I pay my fines. It's okay.
But that's my whole question around confessions and things. Which, I mean, you go and commit a sin, so to speak, and then you go to confession, and you go commit the sin again. So what was the point of going?
So that's going to be a whole other series of episodes about tshuva, repentance, how that works, second chances. That's a really important part of how companies
but it's similar in the sense what's the point of making the sacrifice if you're not going to change your behavior?
Absolutely. So that's what he says. Exactly. Then he says a verse saying, okay, what serving God boils down to three things. So after all, I am a rabbi, and this is a podcast about Jewish values. This is just how they impact business. So it goes like this. I will tell you, man, what is good. Uma Hashem doresh mimcha, what God demands from you. Which is interesting because basically says both for people and God, what they demand from you. Which means this is going to affect your relationship with other people. Hence, your own personal life, family life, and also business as well. Because at the end of the day, in a business, you're serving people. You're providing value to people. We went over that a lot in the last 4 episodes about humility, providing value.
Which the card will be inserted here.
And he says 3 things. 1, ki imasot mishpat, doing justice, ve'avat chesed, loving kindness. Both of those we're not going to go into today, but those are very, very important. The balance between justice and kindness is not always the same. Sometimes they actually have conflict between them, but you have to balance them. And the third one is ve'atznea lechet im Elohecha, literally meaning walking with modesty, walking in the ways of modesty with God.
Just a question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Will the Hatzne Alechet Im Elohecha, would that tie into the loving kindness and chesed? And
yes, absolutely. In order to properly, that's right, so all 3 of them are intertwined. Justice is important. Kindness is important because you can do a kindness outside of the justice system, but sometimes you have to be just and not do what is above and beyond your the realm of the law, and sometimes you need both. There's a balance of both. In order to do that, in order to achieve that balance, the underpinning thing and the most important thing, arguably, is tzniut, is modesty.
It's interesting because in I've got Pirkei Avot on my phone here. Which the 12th part talks about Aaron and loving peace and pursuing peace, which are like the 2 other things that we mentioned, but he does not mention tzniut in those.
Yeah, that was Ohev Shalom, Rodef Shalom, Ohevet Abriot Umekarvan Torah. She loves peace, chases after peace, loves people and loves all creations, and brings them closer to Torah.
Yeah, so why would that particular passage not mention?
Why doesn't he mention peace?
Tzniut. If it's
why doesn't it mention tzniut?
Yeah.
With Aaron? Because that wasn't his focus. But you could say that when he operated. Well, let's see. Let's leave that as a question and try to analyze it from.
This is pretty much off topic from what we talked about.
No, but let's bring it back to topic because it's a good question. Like, how did Aaron achieve peace? Did he achieve it through modesty? Why doesn't it say modesty? I'm going to argue that the modesty is underpinning anybody who's successful. The underpinning foundation of how they operate is through modesty.
Yeah.
Versus flamboyance. So let's define modesty. The word tzniut in Hebrew actually means to cover.
Yes.
That's what the word means. Then we're going to get back to what it means in Micha. But that's the word tzniut. For example, in the army, they always talked about when we had our packs and basic training, we had to pack everything up. There was strings in your packs.
Yeah.
And they wanted us to be neat, organized, disciplined. So they said, tatzniu tachutim. Like, hide your strings. So basically you have to tuck it in.
Yeah.
And the word they use for that is latznia. Interesting. We talk about tzniut. One time I was in where was it? Crown Heights in Brooklyn. And tzniut in Yiddish pronunciation could be said tznius, and some people say snuyus. So there was a store, I kid you not, that said like this, SNUIS. Like, what's a snuyus? It's snuyus. That's what it said. So, in fact, it's a really Hasidic New York Yiddish. This is a very niche market here.
Yeah.
Very niche. Even within the Jewish people, it's niche.
Clothing store.
Yeah, clothing store. That's snuyus. It's very snuyus. I was across from the kosher pizza place where we ate out good pizza, by the way. Deep dish. This is before I was off gluten. It's New York. Yeah, so. It's good stuff. So the point is, we equate tzniut with clothing usually. So when you mention tzniut to people, the first thing that will come up is usually how a person dresses, specifically about covering the body. Do they cover their body or do they expose their body? How long their sleeves are, how long the skirt is, are they tight pants, are they not tight pants, etc. Does the person cover their hair or not?
Yeah.
Does a woman cover their hair if they're married or not? That's usually the context of tzniut. Unfortunately, I say this unfortunately, there's too much of a focus, in my opinion, about tzniut only for women, because tzniut is both for men and women. As Micha says, he doesn't say it's only for women.
No, it's
he says
for
it's
everyone.
for everyone.
Yeah.
And he also doesn't talk about clothing.
Yeah.
Specifically, he says this is what God wants from everybody. Justice, kindness, and modesty. So, what does that actually mean? Rav David Kimchi is one of the more prominent commentators on the Bible, on the Tanakh, talks about those three things. And when he comes to tzniut, he says as follows. I'll just read it in Hebrew and translate. Hu ichuda elit barach be'ahavato b'chol levavo b'chol nafsho. It is knowing the oneness of God and loving God with all your heart and all your soul, basically mirroring what it says in the Shema prayer. Ve'amar ve'atznea, and it says to be modest or to cover up. Ki hadavar hazeh masur lalev. It is something within a person's own heart that they do not necessarily publicize. So basically, you have to be real. It's about what you really think. Are you really walking with God? That only you know in your heart and only God knows. So that's why it could be, back to your question, with Aaron HaKohen, then it was real. Why were people attracted to him? In terms of when I mean attracted, I mean he was able to bring peace between people. You know what he used to, the tactic he used to do according to the Midrash, say two people, let's say we fought, so we'd go to you and say, Amos, listen, Ariel wants to make up, I know you fought, just meet, he says, meet him tomorrow at 9 a.m. And then you'd come to me and say, listen, Amos wants to make up. And I know you wouldn't talk to, he wouldn't know. He got it, he had credibility. And everyone's like, oh, Aaron brings peace. Okay, well, if Amos is willing to apologize, I'll come. And you're like, if Ariel's willing to apologize, I'll come. And then we come and like, listen, I know, thank you for coming. And you're like, thank you for coming. Like, I know.
Thanks for your apology. What do you mean?
What do you mean? What do you mean? And then basically they'd hash it out.
Yeah.
But they get to a point where they'd be like, you know what? If Aaron said it, we should apologize. We should apologize. Let's hash it out. And you created real peace. Why? Now, the interesting part is, in terms of modesty, he wasn't in the middle of that conversation. He didn't take credit. I did it. I'm so great. Which is kind of leaning towards arrogance. But he didn't have to be part of the picture. He just did what was right. He was real. It's about being real.
Yeah.
So that's what Rav David Kimchi says, as it says here in one of the commentaries I see here. Liot amiti bidvarim hanasim balev pnima. Just to be real on things that happen within a person's own heart. And when a person's with themselves, are they real or not? Or are they projecting something that they're not? Which is the opposite of modesty, which in Hebrew would be called pritzut, which literally means to go out of the borders. Lifrot gvulot is to basically break the borders.
Yeah. In
this case, it would be flamboyance. There's it could be grandeur. We talked about immodesty, obviously, but flamboyance and grandeur are two things that kind of stick out. Meaning, making yourself grander than you usually are, or just being too flashy. Such a flamboyant, saying, "Look at me, look at me." It's not even. It doesn't necessarily have to do with arrogance, though it ties into it. But it's about attracting attention to yourself versus just being real. And think about, you think about in your life, who you'd be more inclined to see as a source of credibility, and who you'd be more attracted to, say, as a friend, as a colleague, as a person. Somebody who's real, authentic, or somebody who's flashy.
It's always the real one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always 100%.
But not necessarily initially. In the short term, people are flamboyant because it works. for short term.
No, but like you need the attraction factor, so to speak, which is the flamboyance, and then after that you need a hook, and the hook is being real. If someone's authentic with you, that's your draw card to them.
Right. So let's say a company's building...
So it's almost a combination of the two, but knowing when to...
Right. But
show
there's
part.
a medium. There's this like threading the needle between modesty and flamboyance, which is aesthetics. Being aesthetically pleasing. So if a company's building a website, they're going to want to build a nice website. But there's a way to do it with an underpinning of modesty that still looks nice.
Yeah.
And professional. Versus flamboyant. There's a point where a company crosses over. Maybe they want to be. That's a choice that a company will make. If they want to be over the top. Maybe that's how they attract. Maybe that's their market. But again, it's a choice. The point is it's a choice. And modesty factors in to a company in terms of, do they want to over-grandize themselves? Do they want to over-embellish, if you will, their brand, how great they are? Or do they want to just be real and authentic with you? I would argue that, salespeople, I remember salespeople can be very persuasive and could even drive sales. But there's a huge difference, for example, between sales and marketing. Remember, I'll always remember this. Moti Amar, one of my professors, it was about marketing, specifically marketing in terms of basic marketing strategies, and he was baiting us basically for someone to say, "Oh, marketing is basically sales." Once he baited us, he stopped the class. I think he always wanted to do this. He stopped the class. So the 10-week course. This is lesson number 1.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Who said that?" And then the person realizes, "Oh no, I shouldn't have said that." But he baited us. He waited for someone to say that. And then he had basically what he said is like, marketing is not sales. And he gave us an example, a really interesting example, which I use this in terms of marketing Judaism. But he says, the difference between marketing and sales. Let's say you design a car. And this car is designed, because you can design a car in many, many different ways. So the car is designed for 20 to 30-year-old young single women or young women.
Yeah.
So basically, it has a more feminine feel to it, and when you turn it on, the music blasts really loud, and it has a place for your purse and a place for a big coffee cup and whatever it is, right? And all the different designs, and a mirror that's also the makeup for your makeup, and all there. It's all there for you. So it's not. And let's say there's 200 of these cars that as a salesperson you have to sell.
Yeah. And
you sold all 200 cars in record time, let's say within a month. But 70% of the people you sold it to are men ages 65 and older. You sold them on the car because of the cost, price, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not designed for them. It says, what's going to happen to... So what do you think? What's going to happen to the company?
Well, the sales are up, but the marketing is not necessarily to the correct audience.
Correct. So he says that company will go bankrupt.
Interesting.
The company will go bankrupt. You made your flashy sale, but...
To the wrong people.
To the wrong people. Meaning, for our context, because you can take that in many different avenues. In our specific context of modesty, you were inauthentic.
Yeah.
You were inauthentic. Or at least tell the people, instead of like pushing the sales, right? This is, for example, in Judaism, there's people who can get, say, we're so great, we're amazing, look at what we do, give us a donation. And they can probably raise a lot of money. and say, look how great we are. I mean, I won't mention specific organizations, do that another time. But one of the larger ones, the truth is, as an organization, they're very big. As fundraising, they're very big. But in terms of their actual following, they're not. Because it's, I don't know if necessarily it's inauthentic, but they don't present Judaism in a way that's actually sustainable. They're just trying to get you to give them a donation, get you to support their lifestyle, but not because you're going to buy into their lifestyle. They're salesmen. I even had somebody from this organization on a Zoom call we had recently saying, we're God's salesmen. And I was thinking to myself at that moment, it kind of dawned on me. It's like, I'm not God's salesman. I'm God's marketer. I want, just like my professor told me, I'm not interested in just selling, so you come to my service and give me donations. No, I'm interested in you buying into this long term. And the definition of good marketing is to have loyal clients. To increase the amount of loyal clients that will be long-term loyal to you, and that is successful marketing.
So going back to
modesty,
the modesty thing, would you say marketing is more like modesty than
sales? On a very puristic level, you could change your sales pitch.
Yeah,
you could be a salesperson, but come from a marketing perspective. It's not about the profession. There's nothing wrong with sales.
No, but in terms of
but the question
the practice.
Meaning, the question is, what's your mindset? A person could be a marketing director or a sales representative. It doesn't matter. It's a matter. Marketing versus sales is a mindset. So basically, the point is that everyone should be in a marketing mindset, even if their goal is to drive sales, because that will ultimately drive more sales longer term, because you're basically looking for loyalty. So I would tell that person in the car example, listen, you should know, I don't want to sell you this car because it's not for your target market. Because if you sell it to, now if they buy it anyways and they know it, it's on them. But I was authentic.
Yeah.
But you have to know how to say no to somebody, because you have to be authentic. That's is being authentic. When it's just you and God, right? Be real, and that's really, if you're real, then, and you're not doing things just for the flamboyance or just for the grandeur, right? Which really slides into the whole concept of dress codes and clothing, and because modesty is, as we say, snoyas, right, related to clothing, and with clothing, people can dress. The fashion industry is huge, one of the largest industries, in the world, massive. And you even think of the high-end stuff, like who wears that? A, people do. B, the oh my God, the runway clothing, which is the catwalk clothing, which is out of like 99% of people's price range, does start different trends which are within people's price range, and that trickles down. Yeah. I don't think there's anything, we can debate about the fashion industry. I'm not going to talk about the fashion industry today. I don't think any industry is, maybe outside of prostitution, I don't think any industry is morally wrong. There's nothing wrong with the fashion industry as an industry, but the question is, now that it's so big and there's all these different types of clothing, do we get to a point where the clothing dictates our behavior, or the clothes make the man, so to speak, or the woman?
So let's get into a little bit of modesty versus humility. Yeah. So what's the big difference? What do we think is the big difference? So what do you think is the big difference?
So modesty is about being authentic and covering up yourself. It's the opposite of Greek culture, which we'll touch on like in future episodes. But Greek culture effectively was show off your body, because the body is incredible. Modesty is cover up your body because it's special.
Yeah.
You know, we cover things up. Something's really special, you put it in a safe. Why do you put it in a safe? It's so special. You know, if your body is special, then you put clothes on it. Why? To show that how special your body is, not just for warmth, right, or whatnot, but for protection, which is part of it, of course. But and you also don't want to attract attention to yourself. Modesty is the opposite of attracting attention to a person's self. Humility is knowing your place and not and not letting your ego drive you.
Yeah.
So it's different. Meaning a person could be flamboyant but very humble. Obviously, there's an arrogance to being flamboyant because you want to attract people to your ego. But it's not the same thing. Humility has nothing to do with covering up or not covering up. It has somewhat to do with authenticity, but it's more like I'm focused on the value, not focused on myself.
Yeah.
People are confused between modesty and humility because in a Venn diagram there is a large overlap between them.
Yeah.
There is, but there are different values, different quality traits altogether, and they stem from different places. The humility is much more of you can have a lot of self-confidence. You can dress in flashy suits and be unbelievably humble.
Yeah.
So, for example, chief rabbis dress in, especially Sephardi chief rabbis, in this very grandiose kind of
golden hats
and stuff, and it really attracts attention to them. So you can debate if that's modest or not. Maybe they're doing it for a purpose, as a status that people will accept them as an authority, right? But it doesn't affect their humility necessarily.
No,
a person could dress in rags and be very arrogant. So you can dress modestly, but then it's a false modesty. Well, not the answer is false modesty, but
it kind of ties into what we said in previous episodes, which was someone can be. It's similar to the sense that someone can be very self-deprecating, but also arrogant in that sense, and someone can be very humble, but also have no self-confidence. Well, close to none. In the sense,
have a lot of self-confidence is what you wanted to say. Somebody could be humble, have incredible amount of self-confidence, and dress very flashy.
I got it wrong. Yeah.
And the question is, when you get to flamboyance, is that already a shade of arrogance? You can argue that, but they're different definitions. That's the point. So here we're focusing on covering up, not focusing on the person, and specifically when it comes to dress. There's physical and non-physical modesties, and the non-physical modesty, which is basically
we'll finish with this. Physical and non-physical for this episode.
So the non-physical modesty is, in terms of dress, for example, is the concept of simplicity. I remember there's a rabbi in New York who says, in my community, there's people with like original paintings of Rembrandt and Monet and paintings worth millions of dollars. Yeah. So when they wanted to renovate the shul. So people have a lot of money there. And he said his guidance to the board when it came to renovating the shul, he says, I just want the natural light to come in, to be simple. Like nice, but simplicity. Like not unbelievable stained glass windows and showing how great we are, and gold and silver and maybe things that you could afford as a synagogue, but no. Keep it simple, because that's the quality I want to instill when people come into the synagogue. It's a place of simplicity. It doesn't have to necessarily how a person dresses, though it affects that, how a person what I call physical modesty, but it's also modesty in terms of how a person behaves. When a person walks in a room, do they ultimately attract the attention all to themselves, or are they much more of a facilitator in a room? They focus on let's just be authentic. Let's just be real.
Mm.
I don't need you to see me as the most important person, which is of course the overlap between arrogance and flamboyance or immodest.
Yeah.
The physical modesty is how we dress. There's two aspects to it. Covering up the body, and I guess you call it religious modesty, which is why there's a huge focus for women on that, about not exposing different parts of their body, sleeve length, don't wear things that are too tight. It's relevant to men and women the same. Regardless. And that's very important to say, that it's not something that only has to do with women, not even primarily has to do with women. But women just focus on that because of a lot of different reasons, which we won't get into. But it's equal. And the second is, okay, let's say a person's wearing a suit, or a woman's wearing a modest dress or modest clothes, right? Then the question is it flashy or is it not? Should a person dress in, if you can buy a suit that's $5,000 or $500, should you always choose the $500 suit? As far as a company is concerned, how a company dresses, should that, So those are the questions that you have to ask yourself. Yeah. Like, do I want to flaunt my wealth? Do I want to show how flashy I am? Or do I want to take a step back and deliberately not show how flashy I am?
In the case of the suit, it's probably also down to what you say. So someone can say, oh, look, I'm wearing this suit and it's this expensive. But unless they tell you that, you won't necessarily know that it's...
Oh, you can tell. If you know suits, you can tell.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with buying a $5,000 suit, per se, as long as a person can afford it.
Yeah, the majority of people won't necessarily know that this person's wearing a $5,000 suit.
Right.
Just as a side note. I wouldn't know if someone's wearing a $5,000 suit.
You can know. You can know. I don't agree with that. I think you can know. People can tell. People can tell. But the question is, so that's one example. Other examples, let's say, for example, brand names, right? So a person can wear like regular pants, and let's say somebody can afford Gucci pants, like sparkles and designs on it, and we can talk about that example.
I think that's getting a little bit into what we want to talk about next episode as well.
Right, but as a concept, without getting into specifics, as a concept. So let's say, all things being equal, a person would wear both. A person can afford both. All things being equal. So is there any merit in wearing that? And if somebody wears something that attracts attention to themselves, does it have a positive effect? Does it have a negative effect? Or is it or is there just a place for individual expression? And that's really where we're going to leave it off this episode. And you have to listen to the next one to hear about examples, about case studies in professional leagues and companies and startups. And we're going to be talking about that next episode, so tune in.
Yeah. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Catch us on Thursday.